Well, look who managed to make more than one video in the span of 8 months. Alright, so last week I made my definitive tier list on how I rank these Crash games in the year 2023. Some of you were very surprised with my picks. Reddit specifically was not too thrilled, but to be fair, I'm not usually on Reddit that often, and the rest of you were just happy to see I was making things again. Anyway, to carry the momentum of my return forward, we're gonna do just what I said in the last video. Let's get this party started. The year is 1994. The founders of Naughty Dog, Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin, were fresh off their 2D fighter, Way of the Warrior. Realizing the rising trend in the platforming genre, and being on the cusp of the switch between 2D and 3D gaming, the pair set out with a small team to create what would become known as one of PlayStation's most iconic characters. The concept originated in the spirit of bringing mascot games, such as Mario and Sonic, from the 2D realm to the 3D realm, hence the codename of Sonic's Ass Game, due to the fact that the player would be looking at the character's backside for most of the playthrough. By 1996, after going through several different stages of development, including a temporary title of Willy the Wombat, the legendary 3D platformer known as Crash Bandicoot came to store shelves on September 9th, 20 days before the US release of Nintendo's 3D offering Super Mario 64, and only a couple months after the Japanese release. This game, and its sequels, would propel Naughty Dog into the limelight as one of Sony's best and most reliable game developers, and leave an impact on our generation. And one day, a little boy would take his first ever video game controller in hand and play it for himself. That little boy grew up to be me. My name is Nostalgia Nate, and this is a video I've been wanting to do for a long time. Welcome to Replaying Crash Bandicoot. To preface this, I'll let you all know that I'm going to be using the Insane Trilogy's footage for a lot of my analysis. I will, however, throw in some gameplay from the original PlayStation whenever I need to make a comparison between the two games. Let's hop into the story. So right away, there's some background context that you kind of just need to know and accept, despite the fact that it won't be really fully explored until other games in the series are released. First off, Cortex is genetically altering the wildlife on the Wampa Island using a device called the Evolvo Ray, which he takes credit for despite the fact that Nitrous Brio is the one who invented it. And yes, I'm going to keep pronouncing his name as Nitrous Brio, because if I call him by his nickname, I'm going to get put on a fucking list somewhere. Anyway, we know Cortex is doing this to the animals because we see cages for some of the game's bosses here. Second, the Evolvo Ray is not to be confused with the Cortex Vortex, which is what brainwashes the modified animals after the fact. These two are different machines, and while it's not terribly important, because most people aren't playing Crash Bandicoot for the story, I figured I'd include this detail for us nerds who actually care about the franchise. Third, the day before Crash is set out to be put in the Vortex, he falls in love with a female Bandicoot named Tana. We're just supposed to know this, they don't exactly specify it in the opening cutscene, and they don't really go over it anywhere down the line. And finally, these are called Wampa Fruit, not apples, not peaches, not mangoes. G Fuel also made a Wampa Fruit flavor, so if you're watching this, G Fuel, sponsor me. Okay, thanks, back to the show again. The opening cutscene sees us in the lab of Dr. Neo Cortex and his assistant Dr. Nitrous Brio as they attempt to put Crash into the Cortex Vortex so that he could be the general of Cortex's anthropomorphic army. Nitrous Brio says that the Vortex has not been properly tested, so they should wait before trying it on Crash. Cortex refuses this advice and sends Crash into the Vortex anyway. Crash is swiftly rejected by the machine, causing the experiment to be an absolute failure. Cortex chases Crash straight out of a window into the ocean below. Following Crash's fall, Cortex tells the lab assistants to prepare the female Bandicoot in reference to Tana. This is where we get our first difference between the original and the Insane Trilogy. In the remake, we see Tana fighting back against the lab assistant, and in the original, she just kinda stands there, like, real L move there, Tana. If you're gonna not even try to help us out, then you're super useless. It's no wonder they left you behind in this game. Speaking of, they never really explain how Coco came to be. I kinda went over this in my ranking video, and I guess it's really more of a Crash 2 conversation, but Tana kinda just disappears and we get no explanation as to why. I know outside the game's lore it was to give the players a more age-appropriate female protagonist, but the lore gives us nothing, and acts as if we're supposed to always know that Crash had a sister. Anyway, tomorrow's problems for tomorrow's me. Crash washes up on Insanity Beach and decides that he needs to go save his girlfriend, who's really making me question this whole E for everyone rating, because I've seen some of the fan art you people have been creating, and So, you traverse the Wampa Islands and beat up some of Cortex's best soldiers on a quest to get the girl, get these hands, and beat that big brain bastard once and for all. Alright, so we got some hands to throw, but how does the game actually work? Well, the team at Naughty Dog had a lot of things to consider when it came to building a platforming action-adventure game in the third dimension. When it came to Crash himself, there was a balance between giving the character personality and giving him playability. For example, the team dedicated most of their valuable polygons to the titular character, giving him huge facial expressions and idle animations similar to that of characters in Looney Tunes. In order for us to really enjoy these animations and to get a good feel for Crash's personality, the developers offered us different points of view in which to experience each level. There are levels with the players behind Crash, as mentioned earlier, but in addition to this, there are levels where Crash is facing the camera, such as boulders, and even tricky side-scrolling sections that serve themselves well to the limited 8-way movement of the PS1 D-pad. On the level design end of things, many of the levels we get are linear hallway platforming sections that rely on the player's quick reaction times rather than complex and sprawling open worlds with specific objectives. But this doesn't hurt the experience. As is expected of the era, the game presents you with an overworld map that allows you to select which level you want to play. The player is then tasked with getting to the end of each level to move on to the next one, much like the original Super Mario Bros. The difference, however, is that there is an alternate and much more satisfying challenge for the player. You see, where in other games the collectibles on your path were optional power-ups or coins, Crash Bandicoot takes an entirely different approach. Naughty Dog's answer to creating an engaging game world in the 5th generation of consoles lies not in explorable environments, but in perfectible ones. The requirement to experience all that Crash Bandicoot has to offer lies in your ability to destroy every box in each of its levels without dying. Most of the time, this results in the player receiving a clear gem. However, for 6 of the levels, this will result in you receiving a color gem instead. These colored gems would unlock previously inaccessible paths in previously completed levels, allowing you to go back and get the level's gem. I will note here the second difference between the original and the remake. In the Insane Trilogy, you simply have to collect all the boxes to get the gem, completely foregoing the no-death rule. This is with the exception of the colored gems, which still require no-death runs. In short, this means that the player is fully in control of the game's difficulty at all times. If you want a casual playthrough where you don't have to worry about dying or missing things, you're welcome to it. If you want to push yourself to the very limit and go for everything you possibly can, you're welcome to that as well. Power to the players, as GameStop used to say. Well, for the most part. You see, there's one glaring little issue. It's yet another difference between the Insane Trilogy and the original game. The save system. Crash Bandicoot has an awful save system that only allows you to save if you collect all 3 Tana tokens in select levels. That's right, the tokens don't even exist in all of the levels, just specific ones. So there's a possibility for you to lose a lot of progress in the levels between the ones that contain the ability to save. On top of this, collecting the Tana tokens only gives you the opportunity to save. You see, the tokens take you to bonus rounds of varying difficulty, and the boxes in those bonus rounds count towards your box total for the level, so we 100%ers have no choice but to collect them all. And in that attempt to collect them all lies a chance to die, as there's a ton of boxes that are suspended over the void below, and if you die in the bonus round, you lose your chance to save altogether, and there's no chance to retry without restarting the level from the very beginning. Pretty fucking frustrating. Luckily, the Insane Trilogy fixes this egregious system by allowing you to save at will, regardless of the bonus rounds, and if you die in those bonus rounds, you have the opportunity to retry without penalty to the no death requirement for the colored gems. In addition to the Tana bonus rounds, there's also Nitrous Brio and Neo Cortex bonus rounds, which contain similar conditions, the exception being that Cortex bonus rounds yield keys that unlock bonus levels for the player. Complete everything there is to complete, and collect everything there is to collect, and you'll have earned yourself the bonus ending to the game. I'd show it here, but I would hate to deny you the pleasure of earning it for yourself. Last but not least, we gotta talk about this game's bosses to round out the experience. There's 6 bosses in total, which means that it's time for Boss Rush. Alright, strap in with your strap-ons, kings, queens, and royalty in between, because it's time for Boss Rush, where I show you how to kick ass and get your ass kicked, and remind you how important it is to subscribe. Are you subbed? Good. Alright, let's get this shit. For our first boss, we have Papu Papu and Jesus Christ. If I knew the boss was foreshadowing what I was going to look like at 24, I probably would have thrown my PlayStation away and opted for the Sega Saturn, so I could stink along that console instead. Jump on that head like an OnlyFans creator and that bitch is as good as dead. Second, we got Ripperoo, and dear god, suddenly getting Will Smith by Kangaroo Jack doesn't seem so bad. Blow up that TNT and save being stepped on for your Dommy Mommy and it'll be over before you know it. Third, we have Koala Kong, and goddamn Hulk Hogan's WWE run never looked so good. Luckily for us, he's used to having his balls in his face, so just DJ spin that shit, avoid the TNT, and send that bitch packing the TNA to collect his paycheck. Next up is Chuck E. Cheese in his Godfather cosplay, and I gotta say, he's looking pretty sharp. Unfortunately, weapons aren't allowed in the Rat Casino, so you'll have to play Bouncer. Obviously, don't get turned into Swiss cheese and smack that mouse in the mouth and show him what it truly means for a kid to be a kid. The penultimate boss is Nitrous Brio, and we just gotta remind him that we made a promise to McGruff the crime dog that drugs don't pay. In response, be ready for him to rock his 1988 Incredible Hulk Returns attire and bounce on that chrome dome. Speaking of domes, the final boss is the big-headed bastard himself, Neo Cortex, and he's extra excited to show us his balls. Avoid getting hit by the purple ones and make sure to smack the green ones back at him because you should really get those checked by a doctor. Alright, and that concludes our
Boss Rush.
Back to your regularly scheduled programming. When it comes to competition, people obviously like to point to Super Mario 64 as Crash's rival, and rightfully so. Hell, marketing for Crash Bandicoot has him actively calling out Nintendo's Red Plumber. Personally, I feel like these games scratch two different itches. Crash Bandicoot is a gauntlet of linear platforming that tests your reaction times, patience, and ability to adapt on the fly, while Super Mario 64 provides a leisurely stroll through a semi-open world brimming with secrets to discover. If anything, I would say Super Mario 64 is more in line with the Spyro games, and we'll get to the Spyro games eventually. As far as how Crash Bandicoot was received, it was among the top 10 best-selling video games of all time on the original PlayStation. It's also one of the few Western titles to see commercial success in Japan, with a few tweaks of course. The Aku Aku hint dialogue is the one that comes to mind off the top of my head. I think this is really the only time in the series where I'm going to cover the reception, because even the Bandicoot's worst games have sold over 1 million copies. People love it. This is the part where I throw my hat in the ring now that you have all the background info you need to know. In my original ranking video, I put this game at the top of my list, and a lot of you were genuinely curious as to why that was. I think that the games following it are obviously better from a technical standpoint. I'm not even going to try to argue that one. I honestly surprised myself putting this one at the top of the list because, like I said before, I had a rocky relationship with this game growing up. It was hard and a little clunky. It was easy to play but insanely difficult to master. It didn't hold my hand, it burned it. But I think what made it click for me is how the game teaches you to be patient and resilient if you want to get the most out of the experience. This game was one of my proudest platinum trophies on the Insane trilogy because of how much it kicked my ass. And not for the sake of padding like it's about time, but just for the fact that I as a player insisted that it was something I was capable of. They added time trials to the remake of this game, and let me tell you, this game's levels were not created with the time trials in mind. But nonetheless, they were there for me to face down. By the time I got to the lab's gold relic, I was all but ready to throw in the towel. But through what must have been over 1,000 runs, I was able to overcome it, and it felt good. Good to know that in an era of uncertainty as an adult, there are still areas, no matter how small, where your resolve to succeed is rewarded. From a design standpoint, I love the jungle aesthetic this game presents us with. Each level has its own flair even if it shares a theme with another level. I think that this is something that artist Bob Raffi excels at more than anyone I've seen in the industry. His environmental work is unmatched, and this is exemplified in projects like Jak and Daxter, which I'll definitely be covering down the line. When you look at this game alongside other games of its genre, or even other games of the era, I don't think you'll find a more expressive protagonist that keeps your eyes glued to the screen in spite of a paper-thin plot. You can keep your Final Fantasies and your Tomb Raiders, man, they don't hit like Crash Bandicoot does for me. This is a prime example of pre-cinematic gaming where mechanics and design receive top billing over trying to make a feature film with a controller attached to it. Really makes me miss old Naughty Dog. Okay, now that I made a mess all over my room talking about this game, I believe that's all I have for you guys this time. Let me know in the comments where you think this game belongs on a tier list, and let me know what video I should do next. As a heads up, this channel isn't going to be all Crash content. I'll be breaking it up with other games for my replaying series, so please keep a lookout for that. I also stream Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday evenings over on Twitch. I'll leave the link in the description. Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe, and most importantly, give yourself some love today. I've been Nostalgia Nate, and I'll see you guys soon.